Welcome to July Asset News. My name is Rob, and today it really comes down to stablecoins and an attack on stablecoins and how things are not as they seem. And you may notice that I have a special guest. This is Simon Dixon. Simon is the founder of Bank to the Future, one of the early investors into Bitcoin, and a host of small companies like Kraken and Coinbase and those little places, Bitfinex. So Simon, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. So we see eye to eye on a lot of things. And some of those things are where we just need some clarity. And you put out a pretty good emergency. I always like these emergency broadcasts. They're good. And this one was about stablecoin attacks. And one of the things that perked my interest is you said that, hey, these aren't stablecoin attacks. This is something different. So, let me see. Let me bring this up. So the first question I have for you, before I forget what's going on, is why is this not an attack on stables? Because it seems like that's what it is. BUSD is getting tranched, and we've got a lot of problems that the government is looking at Binance. So when you talked about why this is not attack on stables, so what is an attack on?
Well, it is an attack on Binance, certainly, if you look at the flows here. And also, indirectly, this is an attack on banks as well. So those two things is where I think this goes in the end for the larger geopolitical and the micro. So Binance is not a friend of the US, never has been. Full disclosure, I'm a shareholder in Circle, which issues USDC, and Bitfinex, which is connected to Tether USDT. And I'm not a shareholder in Binance. So, but that's not the reason why I'm discussing, like that. But it is certainly an attack that we have seen on Binance. So Paxos, the way that it is structured, is it's actually probably the best designed stablecoin of all of them. The reason for that is because they fall within the confines of, they set up lots of little trust structures. And they keep within the amount they have in a bank is within the FDIC limit, or is at least this is what they say. And then the rest is not exposed to any bank risks. So over 250,000 is invested in treasuries. And there's not much of, Tether and Circle, where Circle is actually managed by BlackRock. And Tether is managed by a basket of different cash and cash equivalents. So Paxos is the stable coin behind Binance. And really the reason they came after Paxos because Paxos is registered in New York. And so New York Financial Services Department has come after them, as well as the SEC claiming that this is a security. So the SEC, I do think, is the stablecoin attack, but the the New York FDS, that is a way of getting towards Binance because not long ago, Binance switched where every time you deposit USDC on their exchange, they would automatically one-to-one convert it to BUSD in order to try and get the volume of BUSD up. Okay. But at the same time, we've seen that the US exchange and the non-US exchange have been commingling funds. There was the Bitslavo, the exchange that no one's using in Russia, where Binance was, the one that was contributing most to it. They took that down for a $700 million money laundering attack. And really, what I think this is a big multi-billion-dollar fine coming up for Binance so that the US agencies can line their pockets as all of this comes down to in the end. And then hopefully Binance continues on from there, and we don't get this big systemic risk collapse event that some people have been looking at a worst case scenario for the wider crypto markets. But it's a mechanism to get to Binance because BUSD was built on top of Paxos, and also Binance built a bridge. So they were representing it as if it had all the protections of Paxos, but then they were bridging it onto another chain which wasn't authorized. And that would then engage with US customers via either Binance US or off-chain.
Okay, got it. So it's not so much like it's like they're going after the stable coins and stablecoin issuers. Really, they're indirectly going at Binance because the American government does not like Binance, it sounds like. And it also sounds like, no, go ahead. What are you saying?
Yeah, there is a bigger play as well, which is, of course, the central bank digital currency play. So that's why it's an attack on banks. I've said this for a long time. Most people see Bitcoin and CBDCs competing. But actually, CBDCs are an attack on the banking system because it removes their ability to create money as debt when the central bank starts issuing it. So, the US executive order, the real acceleration that we've seen in CBDCs in China, that is a geopolitical play.
Sure.
And at the end of this, you end up having Bitcoin. It looks like the SEC wants to turn everything into a security because of the counterparty risks. And then you've got the CBDCs, which is really preparing for a collapse in the banking system from my perspective.
So do you think that if the government's going to do this behind the scenes and they're going to say, okay, well, this is, we're going to go against these stable coins, and are they going to try to just wipe out all stable coins, even the darling of the United States, which would be Circle and USDC? Jeremy Allaire, the CEO, who has testified before Congress numerous times and said, look, I am fully collateralized. Well, unfortunately, some of it is US dollars. The other part is reserves, other parts. So do you think that's their goal, is just to get rid of all stable coins in general and not so much about the crypto itself?
No, I think the goal is to make it a security. So what they want to do is they want to make all cryptocurrency issued by private companies or foundations into the bucket of securities so that they're tradable upon security token exchanges. And the way that they're doing that is many people are talking about the Howey test. But what we have seen in the case of FTX, and some people have speculated with Bitfinex, is that when you put a stable coin where you can see everything on chain, connect it to a centralized company, then we saw in the case of FTX that they end up being able to create these synthetic balances. And this is what I think some of the accusations are against Binance right now, that although it has this issuance layer, within the actual exchange, you can end up creating these synthetic balances. And therefore, they want full disclosure on all of those companies. And so they see the whole of Binance, for example, as a security because they want the transparency that's needed on that side. I think they want to make stablecoin securities. In the end game, where this all ends up in the US version of the world is that you have CBDCs, which are currencies, you have Bitcoin that's a commodity, and they even came after the proof of stake, services, because they want proof of stake services, exchanges that are exchanging all these tokens, issuing ICOs or IDOs or whatever you want to call it next. And stable coins all traded within a security exchange, subject to all the disclosures and everything that they put together through decades of securities laws.
Okay, great. So before we go on, that makes a lot of sense. Before we go on, let me just ask you this. Do you see this as a world where it actually can work, where crypto is labeled as securities here in America, but it is whatever else it is outside in the rest of the world, which could be commodities or whatever else it is? Can that actually work moving forward? Because I got to tell you, the exchange right now are going to have a heck of a hassle to be, first of all, to register. They don't even know how to do it. And the problem with all the different crypto projects, now they're going to be labeled as securities here, but something else globally. Can that actually work in a global manner?
Yeah, the two-tiered world is very problematic. So the rest of the world and most of the world is doing what's known as what was recommended by Financial Action Task Force, FATF. Financial Action Task Force is the regulator of regulators. So if you're a regulator in a jurisdiction and you don't meet the requirement of the Financial Action Task Force, you get blacklisted. And Financial Action Task Force, which Europe everywhere is adjusted to, said that everybody needs to launch their own virtual asset service provider, VASP regime. Now, the VASP regime is mainly focused on money laundering, which is a code word for tax collection, as their first goal.
Right.
And securities is mainly focused on disclosures and investor protections and suitability. So are you suitable? Are you rich enough to do it? If you lose the money, does it affect you? What does the companies have to disclose? Whereas Financial Action Task Force and money service providers are focused on money laundering, KYC, all that type of stuff. The virtual asset service provider is what the rest of the world is doing, is initially launched with money laundering in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we need is a middle ground where you treat it somewhat like a centralized commodity stroke currency, but you add all the layers of disclosures because there is these issuers of these products. So I think you've got to meet that middle ground, and that's what the rest of the world is doing. But the US is trying to shoehorn their virtual asset service provider regime into the SEC.
Okay.
And I think it's just simply because if you look at the actions of the SEC over the last, their interactions, is they've allowed a company like Celsius, like FTX,
Mm-hmm.
to get as big as it can possibly get. And then once it hits that critical stage, negotiate a fine and really make mafia moves like that, rather than, trying to squash it while it's smaller or put together a bit more of a custom regulation. So US, it seems to be the only one that's shoehorning it in and thinking that the existing security laws are appropriate for a virtual asset.
You know what? So we're going to have to jump around because I was going to talk about some other things. But this was leading me to my fourth question, which is this, because you have direct experience with this. We talked about yesterday about how Gary Gensler came on an MSNBC Squawk Box and goes, look, he goes, it's very simple. All you guys got to do is register. You got to register your exchanges. You're not doing that. You guys are going afoul of the law. We made it super simple. It's crystal clear. That's Gary. And then on the flip side of that, we had your friend, Jesse Powell from Kraken said, wow, if that's the only reason I had to do it, then I wouldn't have lost $30 million and I wouldn't be banned from doing any kind of staking. Then we took a look at Hester Pierce and a couple of different people who said that is not true. It's very difficult to go through. So this would be my fourth question, which is the SEC states it's easy to register. Exchanges say it's non-existent. It doesn't happen. Who's lying right here? Or who is telling the truth? And is there something in the middle? And you've had experience with this.
Yeah, there's definitely something in the middle. They're both telling the truth and they're both missing out a vital part of it. So my experience is that we created a US broker-dealer that we later sold to Coinbase in 2018. And they don't we built out a broker-dealer. It was a registered ATS, so you can trade securities. We use that in order to onboard US investors. But then when Coinbase took it over, they haven't actually been using it. The reason for that is because they'd have to have the same onboarding experience that we have at Banks of the Future, which is you have to find out the source of funds, source of wealth, the different documents you have to collect and ensure that the products you're selling them are suitable, which significantly reduces the number of transactions you can complete. It's a very different business to what they've been used to. So the SEC comes out and says, well, everybody needs to fall within our regulations. Okay, so I do agree that there are regulations for different regimes. If you look at Celsius was an illegal bank,
True.
and there are lots and lots of regulations. You can register as a bank if you want to engage in rehypothecation. If you want to sell an earn program that offers yield, like Gemini and Genesis and Voyager and Celsius were, then you can register it as a security. If you want to hold funds in custody that is fully segregated and has all the investor protections, unlike FTX, rather than commingling those, then you can register as a either a trust bank or a custodian. And then if you want to engage in lending activities, then you can register with these different lending providers. And none of our industries were registering in those ways. They were just registering as money transmitters and money service businesses. So the reason that they're not is, one, because the user experience is not what the crypto people are used to.
Right.
But secondly, it's impossible as well. So after we sold our broker dealer to Coinbase, we acquired a stake in another broker. And then the SEC said, if you are engaging in anything to do with virtual assets, you need to tell us. So we told them. And ever since then, we still haven't been able to put a deal live because they haven't given this new permission class, which is called virtual asset. They then introduced a new regime a couple of years later called a special purpose broker-dealer, SPBD. Now, I know a lot of companies that have applied for that, including our broker-dealer. 2 years later, none of them have received a license and have spent millions. So it's not just the little fee in the little form. What Gary Gensler is referring to is when you're dealing with accredited investors. So if you do an offering with an accredited investor, then you can fill out a form and you can notify the SEC. But if you want to do it retail, it's like applying to be a public company. And when you add the word crypto or virtual assets in your name, none of them have been approved as these special purpose broker dealers. So it is a complete misrepresentation of the reality from both sides. So they haven't been applying because it's very hard and it ruins their user experience. And they know that they're just not going to get where they want to go. And the reason for that is because the SEC has, or these different regulators have all these regulations, but they don't issue the licenses once you're in the crypto and virtual asset space.
Gotcha. So just to recap, you've done this yourself. You've done this with your company, with Bank of the Future. You've gone that route. You've tried to work with the SEC. You have put in the paperwork and the documentation, and it's been languishing so long that it actually hasn't been approved. And it's not just you, but it's other businesses out there. And you probably spent, like you said, millions of dollars to do this without any kind of anything bearing fruit. Is that what I heard correctly?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing, and in the end, we shut it off to US investors and then just work with accredited investors when we do. But for years, we've been trying to get where we can work with open up, as it were, like we have in other jurisdictions all around the world. And we've been complying with securities laws from day zero, since we were the first registered securities business in crypto, and we're now the longest standing company in Bitcoin. But it's still, trying to even BlockFi, they went bankrupt in the process of paying off $100 million fine while trying to apply and fill in their S1 form in order to, get approval for their yield and earn product from the SEC.
So, okay, so let me ask you this, because your business is a little bit differently than, say, like a regular type of exchange. Now, this is Bank of the Future. You can do a lot of different investments. I'm sure you deal a lot with accredited investors, and you guys have a pretty, substantial portfolio. But when we take a look at like the exchanges themselves, like when you say, to register these exchanges as having them be able to offer securities if they go down that route, that is essentially what you will see different places that offer stocks. Robinhood is a very simple example, right? So if they can do that, but they can offer crypto, and let's just say in America it is, and FATF gets involved, but it's something different. If they could just do that, could it actually happen? Which would really lead me to my next point and kind of sandwich it in. Is what the exchange is offering the different things, which is fine. They can do whatever they want to. They offer staking, they offer loans, they were offering synthetics and things like that. Do we really need them to do that? Or do we just need them to do the basic thing, which is just say, look, here's my money. I would like some Bitcoin. I want to do an on and off ramp, and that's it. Could we just get away with that and maybe move forward?
Well, in terms of these services are demand driven. So, we offer securities, we offer equity in the largest companies in crypto, from when they were startups to now some of them going public like Coinbase. Yeah. And so equity is a well understood product, but we've always started as a security. Now, we did lots of innovation along the way. For example, we created the Ethereum mining backed security that invested in the Ethereum ICO and then started mining it when it was proof of work. We did the first Bitcoin volcano bond that was backed by mining in Iceland in 2014. And it was paying, daily dividends in Bitcoin, but it was always a security. And we used the existing securities laws and we used the product of debt and equity, which people understand. And then we wrap that around a lot of innovation. And that's how we do all our retirement plans, for example. We give people a company, and then it can invest in crypto within that company, rather than starting as a crypto and then trying to shoehorn it into securities. So that's why we've got through these processes, but everyone else is in the reverse. All the companies that we invested in, they started as virtual assets. So, what is the solution there? And really it is, the US just needs to follow the rest of the world and take the advice from the Financial Action Task Force, which is set up that in between. You've got currencies and commodities, you've got securities,
right?
You need to borrow a bit from both, and you need to create a virtual asset service provider regime. That can take the disclosures from securities, and it can take, it doesn't treat it as a stock or bond with all these middle people, because the blockchain is the clearinghouse and the transfer agent, just like you have with currencies and commodities. If you get that in the middle, and hopefully that will be the end result of the executive order. But really, again, I think they want to put it all in securities. Now, can they just be, can these centralized companies, are they needed? Well, in the end, hopefully not. But yeah, you need the onboarding and the offboarding, get into Bitcoin, and then hopefully the user experience, us as an industry, make it where you come off the exchange and everything's done peer-to-peer. It's worth noting that it was the centralized leverage that blew up during our deleveraging event of 2022, 2023. The DeFi contract still worked. Obviously that there's layers of scamminess that happens further down the cycle, but the well-established one, they worked as the code provided. So to me, in the end game of all of this is that you have, regulators become increasingly more code, securities become more code. There's this mergence between these different asset classes. And let's not forget that we are in that tipping point of an exponential artificial intelligence adoption curve, which is really how TradFi works right now. If you look at, for example, BlackRock's Aladdin, that controls approximately $21 trillion of assets, and approximately 40% of the stock and bond market just by one artificial intelligence robot. There's no doubt that that's the future of central bank digital currencies, and all of these different services that will be created as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so that would actually take the other questions away, which was, I wanted to play devil's advocate, which you just did for me. Which I said, let's assume the SEC and the NYDF S is a valid point. Could Binance be performing synthetics, fractions of banking, and all that stuff? Which you pretty much said that, look, if you do those things, there's a way to meet in the middle, but you have to do it in a structured way. And anything else you want to add to that, or did I miss it?
Yeah, I do want to say, a lot, FTX, Celsius, those major user cases, they would have been prevented by the existing regulatory regime if they were registered under those regimes. So, there's decades and decades of how you manage a bank with FDIC insurance and, various other things. So, the crypto banks like Silvergate and Signature, they fall within those regimes. Now they've had the stress test as well because they've had so many of their deposits. But we haven't had a collapse in the traditional crypto banks to this stage. We're not out of the woodworks on that one yet. But securities as well. It's just simple stuff. It's sell them to people that are suitable, ensure they're not investing all their lifetime savings like people were in Celsius, and make sure you disclose exactly what you're doing so people can make a decision about those risks. And then you've also got the DeFi stage, which, if you can just take out the middle person, then we don't need to police by enforcement on centralized companies. You've got this middle ground already baked in, which is you allow people to transact peer-to-peer, and you create immutable records of those transactions on the blockchain. So law enforcement can stop outsourcing their job to financial institutions.
Well, that's what's great about the blockchain. They can find all those things on the chain itself. I'll just say this, and then we'll get to the Q&A. when all these things happen with FTX and Celsius and Voyager and things like that, I always thought to myself, man, if they just would have done the right things at the right time. All he had to do was just offer a very simple service. Person wants to buy a crypto, you take that money, exchange it into crypto, you take a small fee. And that was it. And like, this is the thing that I see for exchanges. And I understand what you said, like if there's a demand and people want to do it, but like you said, if there's a demand and there is the documentation and things that they put forth as far as disclosures work, well, great, so much the better. And then lastly, I will just say, like when you said, you know, hey, we shouldn't have people put all their life savings into it. People can go to the casinos, they can put life savings into that. That's just straight up gambling. And people can actually go to Robinhood and spend quite a bit of funds on you know, securities, on stocks, on equities, and go from there. I see that we can allow people to do these things as long as there's a little bit of like, let's not allow the commingling like we just saw with FTX. Let's get a little bit of, you know, to move forward. But again, if we can't move forward, because, you know, like you just told us that it's very difficult to do. You've already tried it with the paperwork and documentation. The SEC, I think, just learning more about this, I think there's more people that are wrong than are right. So then lastly, that's the last one. What's the resolution? We kind of talked about that. So there's a lot of things to uncover there, Simon. I like having you on. It's always interesting. You always make me think about different ways, because I see it as, sometimes I see it a little bit too black and want to get a little too carried away. Like yesterday, it's like these sons of, but now I look at them like, well, maybe there's more people wrong than right. There's always two sides of the same story. So thank you for showing us.
Yeah, the other side to really think about as well is that when shit hits the fan, as it did in 2022, 2023,
yeah,
a big chunk of the investors, they don't go and say, leave me alone, I want to suffer my losses. They go running to regulators and say, why did you allow this to happen? This was a failure from the regulators. Why did you let me invest in this product? And they say, well, fine, we'll just make it available to accredited investors only, because, you know, so it's investors that go to the regulators and demand in times of bad, but they want to be left alone in the times of good. So that's kind of what regulators have to deal with as well.
Well said. Well said. All right, everybody. So what we'll do is, almost 27 minutes. It's not, it's a little bit longer. I'm going to ask everybody to put in their questions. I got a couple right now. So queue up your questions for Simon. We'll ask him anything or ask myself, and we'll go from there. Ross the man says, Rob, stop advertising CoinLedger, as it does too many mistakes. You're going to pay more on your taxes because that stupid app, your money. I love the criticism. I welcome it. So here's the thing, Rasta, talk to me about what specifically is going on, because guess what? Tomorrow, we're going to be going live with the guys from CoinLedger, the CEO and David Kemmerer, or one of the co-founders, and also their CPA and their tax lawyer. So you can ask them all these questions that are coming on. So put it in the comments. I'll ask them, or just come back tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yeah. And we'll go over that. Hello from Portugal. What a treat to have Simon on. You said it. It's a good treat. So I remember that we got together for that Twitter Spaces with the Celsius squeezers. That was a good time, right?
Oh boy, that's been the bane of my life for the last 8 months. But they've really, held me to check, and we've accumulated. We got to the final point after 8 months where I was like, okay, the examiner reports out. Mashinsky is officially a scammer, a fraudster. He manipulated the price to sell. He enriched himself. There was massive manipulation. They didn't have the licenses. There was misrepresentations the whole way. And still, no, I thought we were just going to rely upon that, but they still found a way to make this all my fault as well.
It's always, there's always got to be a scapegoat, brother. That's how it goes.
Well, if it gets creditors back a better result and I've got to be the scapegoat, then fine. I'll take that one. I'll take the hit.
Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. If you're in the U.S., do like I did and move to a crypto-friendly country, the pros outweigh the cons. Because Simon, you're in the UK. You guys are pretty friendly over there.
Well, I used to live in the UK, but in our business, we had to move to Hong Kong in 2015. We spent 3 years changing securities laws in the UK. And after 3 years of reform, we got the whole retail investors can invest in equity in Bitcoin companies. That took us 3 years to achieve. And then they said it was 2013. You can only deal with UK businesses and UK investors. There was blockchain.com. That was the only one we could find. There was few UK businesses and a few UK investors. So we actually had to relocate to Hong Kong. And I don't live in the UK anymore. I live in the Isle of Man, which just has a very... Life is simple for me. I'm not saying it's right for everybody. But in the Isle of Man, you just have this thing called a tax cap. So you just pay one annual fee, no matter how much you make, no matter how much you earn. Eat your heart out and do whatever you need to do with your Bitcoin.
Oh, what? Say that again. So you like it's just one fee for everybody, no matter what you earn?
Yeah. So my tax return just consists of paying an annual fee, a tax cap, which you don't, that's the maximum amount of tax that you pay, and you just pay it every year, one fee, and you can earn and make as much as you want.
Holy smokes. So everybody remember that. Hong Kong, Isle of Man, not a bad place to go to. All right.
Yeah, the problem is if you're American, because Uncle Sugar wants to keep you in America no matter where you go.
This would be the thing. I think you'd have to renounce your citizenship.
That's the Puerto Rico thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Puerto Rico. I mean, on Puerto Rico, at least there's, that's where we live, is you still have to pay federal taxes, but you don't have to pay capital gains tax, depending on how you do it, Act 60. And then there's some different provisions and things to pay for, but in all, it's not bad. I mean, Peter Schiff lives here, so, how bad can it be? All right, this is Kiata Coder asked a good question. U.S. citizens wanting to trade on exchanges outside the U.S. legally is the approach to get a second citizenship, or do you have to renounce? I have no idea on this one. I just use Coinbase these days, and that's it. I don't know if you got any insight.
Yeah, but I can say it's an interesting question because, at Bank to the Future, it doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter. It's the residency of the individual customer or the investor that counts. So as soon as we take on a US investor, we have to comply with SEC regulations in that transaction, whether we're abroad or not. But you as an individual, if you want to get outside the protections of the SEC, it's a tricky thing to do in America more than anywhere else. I know some countries, they have wealth taxes and exit taxes and various other stuff. But America is one of the only countries in the world that no matter where you live, they want to keep you American forever as a tax resident.
Yeah, they love you to death, as long as you pay your taxes. Also, guys, I forgot to make mention of, if you're looking for Simon Dixon's channel, I put in the links in the description. Actually, it's like the first one, Simon Dixon video, which will take you to his channel. And again, I do this really good breakdown of the stablecoin attack and the things that we went over, just in a lot more detail, a lot more concise, without me interrupting with questions. So go check that out and his channel. And I think this comes down to, I think this is the last one.
We normally get a question from someone saying they hate my clocks. That always comes.
They hate your what? Your clocks?
They hate my clock and lamps and think I'm a Saudi Arabian king or something, dictator.
I always thought I think when I first saw some of your shows, I always thought that you were like a James Bond villain because you had like some really cool stuff in the background, and then you had the ocean. So that was pretty cool. Here's a question: what's going to happen to BUSD? Does it only apply to U.S. customers? Because as I understand it, the SEC is saying you can't to Paxos. Well, it's the Paxos who issues it. They say shut it down, and they're going to allow them until February 2024 to redeem. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is the interesting point when you dig a little bit deeper. So it turns out that BUSD was split into two different things. So you had the BUSD that was issued by Paxos, and this is the issues. And the New York has said you got to stop issuing that, and then Paxos has said we won't, we discontinue that. But Binance was actually bridging that onto other chains, which wasn't going via Paxos. Now, this really is the issue of all issues: are we going to have to sanction US customers from stablecoins? And if we are going to have to do that, then the next stablecoin is going to have to figure out on-chain KYC, travel rules, and all the things that pretty much turn a stablecoin into a CBDC issued by a private company. It's very important, because it's not quite a case of you could take US out at the exchange centralized level.
Yeah.
But as Tether is experiencing, if you can use Tether in the US, it's registered as a money service business, but this is an interesting challenge ahead.
I gotta agree. I don't know. It's going to be a long, drawn-out process, and of course, Gary's going to be right in the middle of it. And then, lastly, because I know Simon's got things to do today, Voyager. I just received an email from Voyager stating to start a Binance account in order to retrieve my assets. This is for U.S. customers. Would you guys recommend that move, being that Binance is having problems too? Like, look, here's what I've done, because they still have my documentation as living in Texas, and Texas is not an authorized state for Binance US. So for me, like they say they're going to try to work on a money transmitter license throughout these different states. And if Texas doesn't get it, then they're just going to say, we're going to give you your lump sum in cash. That's really what's going to really turn out to. So for me, I'm pretty much stuck in that one because I left a good amount of crypto on there. And then, of course, with Celsius, who knows what's going to happen with that? I got a nice 6 figures just sitting there, which will probably get liquidated. So for me, that's what's going to happen. For you, for Binance, I mean, look, this is my personal opinion. I can't vouch for Binance, but so far they're still solvent. I haven't seen a problem. They've had a massive outflow as they had these different problems that were coming up. As CZ said, it's just FUD, and they were able to weather the storm. Does that mean you should leave your crypto on an exchange? No, it does not. I got these rules, which are right below Simon right now, and one of them is 0% on exchanges, meaning don't leave your crypto on exchanges. So if they do that, get an Nano Ledger, get a Trezor, take it off, and go from there. Simon, anything to talk about with that one?
Yeah. I mean, I can give you a quick synopsis on the Chapter 11. So
Sure.
In Voyager case, obviously Binance won the bid after FTX blew up and tried to take out Binance in the process, and then Binance took out FTX in the process. And a very complicated term sheet was sent through. You expect to get approximately 50% of your crypto, but the algorithm that they put together in order to buy back your crypto and put it on another exchange, it is very complex. So you may end up with 50% of your coins on Binance. The alternative, as Rob said, is that they have 6 months to apply for a license. If they don't get that license, then they're going to sell for your coins for cash. So personally, I would use Binance as a mechanism for getting my coins off as fast as possible. And the thing that the main thing that I would be concerned about with Binance is more if they had a catastrophic 90% collapse of the BNB coin. Were they marking that coin to market, and was that trying to hide a hole similar to FTX? That's the big question. Do we know the answer to that? Absolutely no one knows the answer, because they don't publish or audit. So you actually don't know. That's the problem. So it's a risk one would have to take. So use it, as Rob said, to try and get your funds off as fast as possible. If you don't want to take that risk, then it's cash, and you're at the mercy of the markets, depending on what the price is when they do that. On the Celsius side, there's actually a court hearing tomorrow where Celsius still are yet to put together a plan 8 months later, and I've already given them 4 different plans throughout this whole process. They also had bids that in court, the lawyers, Kirkland and Ellis, lied in court saying that none of the bids allowed people to get their equity or liquid assets, and our bid did, and it was leaked by Tiffany Fong. And there was other bids that did as well. So literally, they got caught lying in court. So Celsius is a real bad actor at this stage. And now, yesterday, it hit the docket that a bunch of regulators have all just said, the UCC objected to them extending. We had to lobby them all. The US trustee representing the Department of Justice it said you can't extend exclusivity. A lot of creditors and now 40, about 18 different regulators said, we don't believe you've got a plan. we think you're going to run out of money before you actually release a plan. And so they've said the 15th of February is the deadline. Compare that with BlockFi. On day one, they released a plan. They're already in the bidding process. They're getting ready for that. Voyager already through the auction. Genesis Gemini, they've already negotiated a deal with Digital Currency Group. And Celsius still is the only one that doesn't have a plan. So these Chapter 11s, they've turned out to be the biggest scam I have ever been involved with for protecting companies that have committed untold of fraud. And the lawyers are the ones that get paid. Essentially, what they do in Chapter 11, from my experience, is the lawyers make it legal to do what SBF did, spend client money on lawyers, and $100 million later, we're told that if you don't release a plan, you're going to have to liquidate, which we could have done from day one. What a scam.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that? That's the sound of my blood pressure going way, way higher. So on that note, I will just say to everybody, this is the video that I was talking about. There's also a link in the description, so I put it here. I will post it. I will pin it to the top of comments, and you can also find the description. Check out Simon for more great alpha and follow up on Celsius and things like that. And I got to tell you, Simon, I'm right there with you. I'm sad and disheartened that I ever talked about Celsius and had the scamster on the show. And with that, that is it. So look, everybody, thanks for stopping by. We appreciate you. If you like today's video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, all that good stuff. Go check out Simon. And that's it for today. So everybody, have a good day, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Adioso.